All right, this is session 3 of Discovery 2. I'm on page 15 of the manual, at least on the original edition. What we're talking about this week is the family of families, the community of faith. And as you teach this, one way to really set this up is to talk about all the epistles that Paul wrote were all written to churches. They weren't necessarily written to individuals. And very often we take those and we make personal application. And what we want to emphasize in this teaching is that, like the letter to Ephesians, right there, right out of the box on this session, is that these epistles were written to churches. They were written to what Paul uses throughout the New Testament, what he calls the household of faith, the family of families that we talk about at Lake Valley. In other words, it's okay to make personal application from these epistles, but the first application always needs to be in the context of a church, a community. And so we're going to stress that a lot. So you'll talk about that in generic terms right off the bat. You don't think there's any room for discussion, and you'll go straight to a video. Now this video is the shortest video that we have, mainly because this is the largest session of Discovery 2. So you want to keep this session moving. Don't get bogged down in a lot of details. Hopefully they will have read it. But this video is just a funny video. It contrasts a high Anglican church service where Mr. Bean, the comedian, falls asleep, to Steve Martin in Parenthood, where everything's chaos, but it is a family. And we make the point that we believe that the metaphor, the symbol throughout faith is less of an institution like the first video and more like a family with all the chaos that goes along with it. So we'll make that point, and then we really hit hard this whole idea that being adopted in Christ is to be adopted into a family, and that those relationships are non-negotiable. This is where we really hit the R word, the relationship word that we use so much at the very beginning of Lake Valley. Then we talk about small groups and how small groups are a manifestation of that family of families, and that we don't see those just as Bible studies, but as a means to one another, each other. It's also a means for us to do life together. Really emphasize that acronym, LIFE. Then we talk about leadership and how the family structure, that there needs to be someone in charge. Every family has a dad. Every family has someone who's making the calls at the end of the day. And we believe that's the way the church was outlined in Scripture. Paul taught, Christ taught about it. So you'll see some of that taught on the bottom of 16 and into page 17. We also then at that point make sure that we're clear that leadership within a family of families is about servant leadership, not about lording it over. And we try to make that point really strong on page 17. Then we talk about eldership and how we believe that God placed the elders as the head of the household. Then we talk about the qualifications for becoming an elder. Then we talk about some specialized group of elders called teaching pastors here at Lake Valley. And then we clarify some teaching on deacons. One point you may want to be aware of is that some of those who may have come from a Baptist tradition, in the Baptist church, the deacon, its function is much like that of elder. But we want to clarify those terms. And you may get some emotional pushback when you talk about a deacon taking care of physical things and an elder taking care of the overall oversight of the church. As you saw in the elder portion, there are a lot of interchangeable words for elder. You've got overseer, bishop, presbyter, elder itself. But deacon, we believe in Scripture, is really clear, not one of those interchangeable terms. It is a group in and of itself, which is for the care of the physical needs of the church. And we'll unpack that a little bit in that session. But just be ready that you may get some emotional pushback, because we do have plenty of Baptists who, from their perspective, a deacon, or their past history, a deacon was more like an elder. So just go through that very carefully on page 19. Then on page 20, we make that shift that we make in every session to the Lake Valley distinctives. And it's here that we'll talk about a centralized church versus a decentralized church. A centralized being that it's very personality driven, it needs to happen always at the church versus a decentralized church where the mission occurs outside the church most often, that we are launching out the priesthood into the public. We talk about the priesthood of all believers. We make a clear statement, and this is something that we've really got to get in the DNA again. I feel like we've lost a little bit of this statement, but we used to say a lot that there is no they, the they is we. And we hit that really hard on page 20. We really would like you to emphasize that, even talk about that in your groups, that we get really clear that the pastors, the staff's role is not to do the ministry for the body, but it's to help the body do the ministry for itself. So hit that hard. Then we do the contrast between a centralized church and a decentralized church. You want to be careful that we don't talk down to any other church or any other way of seeing things. We just want to be really clear about who we are. Then we come back to eldership, and we talk specifically of what elders look like, how they function within Lake Valley. We talk about 100% unanimity. That just means that decisions are made in 100% unison. There is no 7-to-1 votes on the Lake Valley Elder Board. They need to understand that that is maybe not always the most efficient way to govern, but we believe it's the most effective. In other words, when we have made a decision, we have thought it through well, and everyone in the leadership's on board, and we encourage everyone to take those stands. So that's an important point there. Bottom of page 21, we start talking about discipline and restoration. Everyone or many people will have experienced church discipline in the worst sense of the term, or they may have not experienced it at all. And it seems like those are the two options. So as you're teaching this lesson, you need to be aware that some will have their guards up because they've seen it done poorly. And then you'll see there'll be people in your group who have never even seen it done, that a lot of churches aren't even exercising this restorative process that has clearly laid out in Matthew 18. As you go through this, be very clear that they understand that the point of church discipline and restoration is to restore people to Christ and to restore people to the families. It's not punitive for the sake of just being punitive. It is to draw people back to Christ. So be sure that they understand that. Then we talk about family ministry and our view of it, how we want to see it as a multi-generational body, truly as a family, that we have, like a body has Christmas dinner together like we just experienced. You don't put the kids and give them their own Christmas dinner and they don't intermingle with the adults. We really have a high value of worshiping with our families, of teaching with our families. So just be sure to emphasize that. Worship, we talk about how we want it to feel like a family and how that affects the need to emphasize performance a little bit less than some churches that are all about slick, polished performance. So I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions about either of those, feel free to call the office staff. We really want them to understand at the end of the day when we talk about worship, and there's a quote here, is that worship is much larger than music. And we really want you to emphasize that. I don't know that I've ever seen an argument in worship over too much scripture reading or things like that. It's almost always about the music style. So we really want you to emphasize that worship is not music. Music is a way to worship. And we really want to avoid worship wars at Lake Valley. We are part of culture, and there's a certain element of that in any church. But we really don't want to get into those arguments. And this is an opportunity for you as a home group pastor to kind of lead out to stop some of that, to help us with that. We end this session with a paragraph, and it says, worship at Lake Valley should feel like a family reunion, a time where we come together as a family. So really emphasize that, and then congratulate them for finishing the longest session, maybe the longest session on this instructional video as well. But get them prepared to talk about the E. Remind them that if they are not a member of Lake Valley, they'll have the opportunity to sign up to join us on our mission. And get ready for that final session, which is all about the mission, about engaging. Thank you very much.